Hi, everyone. May peace be on you all, and welcome to another episode of I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. And I am back with another gift of the gab. And this one is for May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I have with me Allissa Torres from Mental Health America. You are the director of Mental Health Equity at MHA. Is that correct, Alyssa? I hope I didn't botch that up.
Yes, I am. I am. And I'm happy to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. I'm looking at your bio, and that's the thing. You have over 10 years experience working at mental health nonprofits and that you're passionate about all things equity and mental health, and your focus is basically on BIPOC and minority communities and the mental health struggles in those communities. I think that is so integral. I don't think we realize, because that's what we do. We generally have this tendency of lumping mental health together as a universal thing, but I think it affects us in different ways, especially when you're from a minority community. Before we get into that, please, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what is Mental Health America?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that introduction. And I am the director of mental health equity for Mental Health America's national office. Mental Health America itself is the leading community-based mental health organization in the United States. We were actually the very first. We started over 100 years ago
Oh, wow.
by a gentleman named Clifford Beers, who was able to really focus in on prioritizing lived experience at the
Mm,
center of everything mental health, and ensuring that the conversations about mental health were focused in on the specific needs for individuals who at that time were institutionalized,
right.
and understanding that there are these basic human rights that individuals should be able to have and that people should be able to thrive
Mm,
in their mental health and mental wellness journey as well. So, as a national organization, we focus on policy, public education, and service within federal, state, and local levels. And in addition to that, we have affiliates in most major cities throughout the US who also provide direct service and outreach to those in their region. And beyond that, as well, we provide free mental health screenings. That's one of the things that I'd love to talk about today
oh,
a little
wow.
bit more.
Yes, please.
And resources, calls to action on our website, as well as we put toolkits out several times a year that have information about outreach, fact sheets, worksheets, sample messages that you can put
Hmm.
on your social media if you would like to. For example, right now we have May is Mental Health Month.
Mm,
So we put out a toolkit for that, and we've been really excited with the results of that, being able to spread awareness,
hmm.
and get the information out there and make sure that
Right,
people understand that mental health is for everyone. Mental health
right.
is a part of you, and it's affected by so many different aspects of your life, and we want folks to talk about that. We want folks to talk about mental wellness too, just as much as they talk about mental illness. We don't want to only focus on the deficits. We want to make
Right.
sure that individuals understand that your mental health is completely a part of your journey, a part of your life,
Hmm.
and it's affected by so many different parts. And it's really important that we have the resources to be able to understand that. We have the words to be able to understand,
Mm,
what are these characteristics that I've been having? Do they fit into a certain diagnosis? Maybe they don't. And what does that mean? And where's this community that I can find for myself, or where are these other resources that I can check in on my mental health or check in on a loved one's mental health?
right.
So we have that. We have our screenings at mhascreening.org.
Hmm.
And these are the same types of screenings that you would get if you were an individual who, say, maybe you brought this up to your doctor. Maybe you're like, hey, doc, I've been feeling pretty funky lately. I'm
Mm,
not getting out of bed. I'm not really interested in the things I used to love anymore. I don't really want to be around people anymore. And your doctor might say, hey, I'd like to give you a for example, a depression screening.
Right.
We have these screenings on our website already, free
Oh,
and
wow.
available to the public. You're welcome to take them at mhascreening.org. And on these screenings, they're super quick, they're super easy, and
Mm,
you don't necessarily have to go to a doctor first, which a lot of us
right.
know that can be really challenging
Right.
for folks. So our screening program is something that we're really proud of, and we also have learning pathways that can follow your screening. So say you took a test for depression, for example, you can take a test for depression, you finish up, you get your results, and at the end of it, we send you onto these learning pathways in which
Mm,
you can look through articles that have the answers to questions that you might be asking yourself. Am I
right.
crazy? What does this mean for me?
Right. Right.
How do I get to a doctor? What is all of this? How does this play out in my life? Or what do I do with this? Do I have to be on medication? I don't know. A lot of folks it can be a lot at first. So we like
Right.
to make it easy, and we like to make it accessible.
Right. But if could I rewind for a bit? I think the screening itself is such an amazing tool, but especially when it comes to minority communities, BIPOC communities, there's still a whole lot of stigma surrounding mental health and mental wellness. Could you speak on why that is, and how do we get more people from minority communities to actually get to the screening test? That in itself is a huge barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we talk about individuals within minoritized communities, within communities of color, um, there's a lot of cultural factors that are
Hmm.
in play for folks. I myself am Mexican American.
Hmm.
I consider myself Chicana, and
Hmm.
Chicana is a term that describes an individual who is born in the US but has Mexican ethnicity.
Hmm.
And I myself have always seen within my family that there's a lot of shame that comes around the topic of mental health, and this is something that tends to happen throughout various BIPOC and minoritized communities,
Right.
where we might not have always had the language to talk about this. Just this past week, I was talking with some family members, and we were talking about ADHD, and we were talking about
Mm,
other mental health conditions, and we are like, you know what? It's always been about like the cousin that's a little bit hyper, a little bit
right.
jumpy, a little bit distracted. And
Right.
we haven't used the terms ADHD to talk about this, but there are
Right.
terms, and these terms help us to be able to categorize that. So um, when we talk about screening, it's important to realize that when these screenings come up with these potential severities for certain diagnoses, right? For example, anxiety,
Mm,
bipolar, things like that. These terms aren't as scary as they look, right? They've only really been around within the past 100 or so years. There's, but the way that our brains have worked for forever, the way that our cultures have communicated about these things, this has always been around. They're just different terms that we're using to be able to categorize these sets of characteristics. And so that's something that's really important for folks to understand, especially within BIPOC communities. And for those that don't understand what the term BIPOC means, I know that that's not always a term that's used within different communities. So that is a term that stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. It was a term that was created to really get away from the word minority itself,
right. Right.
and to focus in on the specific identities within communities of color. But within screening, we really want folks to understand that it's okay to check in on your mental health. It's okay to
Mm,
just look at what these characteristics might be. If you're feeling some type of way, check in on yourself. Check
right.
in on your brain, and make sure that you have the ability to get the tools that you need, because at the end of
Right.
the day, these tools are going to support you. They're going to help you. And maybe you don't love the label, and that is totally okay. You don't have
Right.
to stick with the label. The label is really just there to help doctors categorize that for insurance purposes, for medication purposes, for treatment purposes. But those labels don't have to be an end all be all for folks, and that tends to be one of the biggest barriers to support for folks seeking mental health treatment, is that they get scared of these labels. And
Right.
there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of shame that might come up. What does that mean? Am I crazy?
Right.
Am I weak? And that's not the case. We all are individuals who have these incredibly beautifully complex minds,
Right.
and our brains work in different ways, and our brains are affected by different things, like trauma, like
Right.
socialization, like our communities, like from our DNA, from our
Hmm.
resilience, from our ancestral resilience that
Right.
so many of us have had. So it's important to understand that your mental health is a part of you as a whole person, and
Right.
not just this wild foreign concept that nobody wants to touch, because
Right.
it can be really scary when you don't have the language and nobody in your family has ever talked about this before. But we want to make it easy for folks. We want to make it
But
accessible.
that's the thing, Alyssa. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the thing that I think a lot of people are afraid of the label. Me personally, I mean, for me, knowing that I am not crazy, that there is a reason for my ADHD, my depression, my anxiety, which I didn't even know what the symptoms were as a kid growing up. You just thought that there was something wrong. You knew that something was wrong with you, but you didn't have the words for it. But that's the thing. A lot of people, especially, like, I can only speak of the Pakistani community in the background, but that's my background. That's what I can speak of. It says they're like, but I'm fine. Like, I've made it through life. I'm okay. So, but that's the thing. How, like, a person may think that they're okay because of the prevalence of certain issues. Depression is one of them. Depression can be a very prevalent, and anxiety is another. Anxiety and everything that comes with it, but they've seen it, that we've seen it so much within our communities. They're like, but that's how people normally act or behave or react. I'm okay, sort of thing. So what benefit would it be for a person to go to the MHA website, and how would a person be sure that they need it or not, since they see it so much within their community?
Yeah. So one of the things that is important for folks to look out for
Hmm.
with their mental health, is to look out for things changing in your life. So
Mm.
maybe you have a big stressor that happened. Maybe there's a death in the family. Maybe there's a
Right.
job change. Maybe
Right.
things at work have just been beyond stressful, or whatever
Mm.
that is. Or maybe the weight of the world's just hitting hard these days. And
Right.
for most minoritized communities, individuals within minoritized communities, that's common, right? we
Right.
we see the weight of the world, and it hits, and it's tough. And we need a way to cope with that. And so when we talk about mental health conditions,
Mm.
and the need for screening, a lot of
Mm.
times people can really know for sure that things are feeling different.
Right.
When they start to know that things are feeling different, that's a good time to get tested for your mental health. Take a mental health
Mm.
screening, take a mental health test, as we call it. But that's also not necessarily where it has to begin, right? Because
Mm.
that kind of takes a reactive approach.
Right.
And we want folks to understand that it is perfectly fine to take a preventative approach. Actually, it's
Right.
better to take a preventative approach. We want you to check in on your mental health before you reach the point of crisis. I
Right.
want you coming to our website before you get to a point where you're like, I can't function, I can't think straight, I don't even know if I
Right.
can follow this 10-question survey. We want folks
Right.
to come in and check. If you're just curious about your mental
Mm.
health, if you just want to play around on our website, go ahead and do
Right.
that. I remember years ago, before I even worked for Mental Health America, I was a teenager that was dealing with depression and
Mm,
anxiety, and I didn't have the words to talk about this, and I didn't
right.
know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I wasn't at the point of, I wasn't doing it in a preventative way. I was really
Right.
doing it at a point of crisis, but I didn't have the words, and I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know what anxiety was
Mm,
because my family never talked about that.
right.
And so when one day I think I looked it up and I was like, I've got these symptoms. I don't know what to do about it. And Mental Health America's website came up and I was like, you know what? This is interesting. I don't have to fill out a ridiculous amount of information. It's not like I have to pay for these screenings. There's
Right.
no complex paywall that's going to look a little sketchy
Mm,
when I click on
right.
it or anything like that. Right. And I clicked on it and I just started going through some of the different screenings on my own. And some of them were relevant to me. Some of them weren't. Some of them I was just like, oh, this is just interesting.
Right.
And throughout the years, we've added even more screenings, most
Mm,
recently an ADHD screening. And so if you're just even curious about your mental
right.
health or curious about the mental health of somebody that you love,
Right.
go in, take a test, check it out. Just even dig through our screening website or dig through our normal website. Our normal website is mhanational.org and our screening website is mhascreening.org. And both of these websites have a variety of different kinds of resources.
Mm,
You mentioned the toolkits as
right.
well. The toolkits are one of my favorite things that we offer because we tend to put them out around our public education campaigns. So like I said,
Mm,
right now is mental health month, so we put one out for that. And our theme is look around, look within. We want to talk about the
right.
environment and how the environment affects individuals, and
Mm,
how it affects their community and how it affects your mental health and what you can do to take control of that,
right.
in a world where sometimes it can seem like taking control feels impossible. So what are the little
Hmm.
things that we can do to just, make your sleep better, make your,
Right.
work from home better, make your evening wind down better.
Right.
Um, but our toolkits are so cool because we give you all of the information that you need to go out and spread this information
Right.
to other folks in your community. So one of the things I love that we do is we put out sample social media messages and sample images,
Mm,
for most of our toolkits. And so this means that if you are going into May as Mental Health Month and are saying, hey, I want to share some information, we've got the information for you. You don't need to
yeah,
go jump
that's great.
into whatever program it is that you make all of your content for. You don't have to think of some complex
Mm,
story to write up or
right.
facts to write up. We give it all to you and we say, hey, take this, go out and spread the word. Let folks know what
Mm.
mental health is all about. Let folks know um, what information they can use, what resources they can go towards if they need that kind of support.
I think that's fantastic. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, since we're talking about BIPOC communities, the thing is, mental health awareness, especially in the US, is not generally centered around BIPOC communities. What does MHA have that, I mean, in terms of what can BIPOC communities look at the website that's relevant to them? Like, I'm Muslim Pakistani. I would not expect to have that specific statistic, but something that applies to maybe just the Muslim community, or if somebody who is from the Latino community, what do they have that's specific? Because what most people don't understand is that mental health crises is not the same for everyone. Causes of depression, or like the triggers for depression, anxiety, any number of things, is not the same across communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so at Mental Health America, one of our biggest things is that we want to move away from the generalizations.
Hmm.
A lot of times the two buckets that people tend to go into is white or non-white.
Right.
Or, for example, heterosexual, not heterosexual,
Right.
within the gender binary, not within the gender
Right.
binary, whatever it
Right.
is. Um, and that's not the case. There aren't these two
Mm.
groups. Even white itself is not one group. That's a
Right.
race, but there's a variety of different backgrounds within that. But
Right.
when we talk about BIPOC communities, when we talk about minoritized communities, um, we want to get specific. We want to go from specific communities. We want to have those facts.
Right.
And so on our website, we do have a BIPOC mental health hub, as we
Oh,
call it. And so on this hub, you can find information and statistics that are specific to overall BIPOC mental health, but
right.
also information that's specific to individual communities. So at the moment, we have it split up within, I believe, 6 different ethnic communities. And so one is Black and African American communities. We have Native and Indigenous communities, Latinx, Hispanic communities, Asian American Pacific Islander communities, multiracial communities, and Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian communities.
Right.
Um, and within each of these, we have facts and resources for folks to go into and check out, information such as the prevalence of mental health in those specific communities, the attitudes
Mm.
that individuals might within those specific communities might have, what the treatment challenges might be. And we also have
Mm.
the protective factors. That's one of the things that I think is so important when we talk about mental health, is that we're also talking about the protective factors. For
Mm.
myself, as somebody who's BIPOC, I'm tired of the disparities. I'm
Mm-hmm.
tired of every single, time folks are talking about our communities, they're going, oh, this is why they're so high in their suicide rates. This is why they're so high in
Mm.
their depression rates, or and all these other rates. And yes, those numbers are absolutely so vital and so important to know, because we want to know where the gaps are. We want to know where our communities are struggling.
Right.
But where's the conversation about our protections,
Right.
about our generational resilience? If we talk about generational trauma and how that's
Right.
passed on in socialization and how that's passed on in our DNA, why the heck are we not talking about our generational resilience? Why aren't we
Right.
talking about the way that our ancestors have been um, supporting each other and created systems of community care and systems of community and support for one another in order for us to be able to not just survive but to thrive.
Right.
And so on our website we have all of these different pieces of information for individual communities. We also have information on policy issues for these specific communities, on how COVID-19 had affected
Mm.
specific BIPOC communities, how race has shown up within our screening data that we've
Mm.
gotten, on as well as community care, culturally based practices. And then every single July, we put out a toolkit for BIPOC Mental Health Month. The
Mm.
formal title of July is BB Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's this great time where we get the opportunity to talk about our BIPOC communities in a super specific way. And that's not to say that that May is white American
No,
mental
no,
health
no, no,
month, right?
no, no.
But BIPOC community mental health month was really put out as a way to ensure that we have these conversations in a very
Right.
specific way. And so last year we went with a theme of beyond the numbers, really focusing
Right.
in on what are the specifics within our communities. We talked about historical context. We talked about how folks were affected by diasporas, how folks
Mm.
were affected by, for example, war,
Mm-hmm.
and also how that's affected their community beliefs on mental
Right.
health, and then also what are the strengths that have come out within these individual communities, and what are some of the barriers that have also taken place that we need to learn how to overcome, and what are our calls to actions, as well as like how do you talk to your family, how do you talk to
Right.
loved
Right.
ones, all kinds of things like that. So we put out these toolkit every year, but that's a little bit on our last year's toolkit. This year we'll be coming out with our toolkit about mid-June,
Mm.
And our theme is culture, community, and connection.
Right.
And so we'll continue the theme of getting into environment, just like we did for May. And we'll be talking more about community and how community is a core aspect of your environment,
Right.
and how uh, BIPOC communities have specifically leaned on one another and created things like cultural hubs in which
Right.
you can go to a certain area of town and maybe there's a lot of different restaurants that are
Hmm.
within a certain culture, and you go in and you talk to folks and they're speaking your language, and
Right.
they kind of look like your auntie or
Right.
whoever,
Right.
and you're like, yes, these are my people and this is where
Right.
I feel best at.
Right.
And we talk about that. We talk about how that's important, especially
Mm.
as our communities learn how to reclaim our roots,
Right.
and some of us start to have that safety again,
Right.
and that ability to do so.
Right. Now, I think that's so great. I think the last thing I would probably want to ask you. So, let's say I went to the MHA website. I did the screening and maybe got the diagnosis of depression. And I'm sitting there with this information. It can be a lot to take in. Does the MHA website have any resources of who to reach out to when I've got depression. Now what? Which doctor do I go to, or do I go to a doctor or not?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And
um
that's the thing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no, go
cut you
ahead.
off, but especially in BIPOC communities, is when, like, if I'm the first generation to even acknowledge that I have depression and anxiety, I have no idea what I'm doing. Quite frankly, I have no idea what I'm doing. So for people like me, like, how would the MHA website be helpful to guide me to where do I need to go?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have on our screening website are these learning pathways, and so within every screening that we
Hmm.
have a variety of these learning pathways that can help folks. So, for example, if you go under our depression learning pathway, it starts with an article that says, "What is depression?" And then it goes
Mm,
into an article that says, "What causes depression? Are there types of depression? Am I depressed or am I just sad? What are
right.
types of intrusive thoughts?" And then we get into things like living with depression. For example, we have an article called "I Can't Get Over Things That Happened in the Past," or "I'm Feeling Lonely." We have another article called "I Can't Get Out of Bed," another one called I Can't Sleep," or "I Want to Die," or "I Hate Myself," or "I can't get motivated." And so we walk folks through what that individually means. And we're specific about the kind of thoughts and questions that folks are going to look up too, right? If you're depressed, you might not be looking up, statistics on depression. You're not going to Google that. You're going to Google, "I'm not motivated. What the heck do I do?" And so when you're able to do that, luckily through the work that we've done in our organization, we've been able to highlight that first, and so we're one of the first organizations that pops up, if not the first, on a lot of these things. And so we walk you through that, and we walk you through, for example, also how do I navigate insurance.
Mm,
um, that's a big one, and especially
yeah.
within BIPOC communities.
Right.
So many of us, because we haven't even had the language to talk about our
Hmm.
specific um, our specific diagnoses or whatever are these specific characteristics, how, what are we going to know about insurance, right?
Right.
I
Right.
I myself am a mental health expert at the national level, and insurance is incredibly difficult for me too.
Half the
So
time insurance might not even cover it. That's the terrible part about all of this, that if you need to go to a counselor, or like there are various medication that might not be covered, what do you do?
exactly, exactly. And so we have articles that are specific on that.
Mm,
And we talk about what some of the barriers to insurance might be. And another thing that we at Mental Health America really want to prioritize is the fact that for many people, therapy or medication might not be
Mm.
the number one choice for them. And
Right.
that's
Right.
not to mean that therapy and medication aren't what can be extremely helpful for folks. For the
Hmm.
vast majority of people, therapy or medication or a combination of both can be incredibly helpful, if not life-saving in many
Right.
cases.
Right.
Um, but it's also important to understand that folks have different support systems. They have different
Right.
community care options. If for you, if religion is a big aspect of your life, and you want to talk to your religious leader, you want to talk to your imam, it's
Hmm.
important to know that you can do that and you can have these conversations, and especially within Muslim communities, we know that imams are most often the first person that individuals will go to for a
Right.
sense of counseling.
Right.
And so being able to talk to them about that can be great. And for some people, maybe that's all they might need. And for other
Right.
people, maybe they need a combination of that. Maybe their religious leader or somebody within their religious organization might be a person for support.
Right.
And maybe they might be the primary person, but it
Right.
really just depends on the individual, and it depends on what your specific needs are. Even within one family,
Right.
siblings might have a very similar upbringing, but they're going to have different experiences in life, and their brains work differently, and so
Right.
it really does depend on the individual's preferences. But we
Mm.
always point folks towards therapy and towards checking in with your doctor and towards our
Mm.
screening program, because this is a great place to start.
Right.
And as you get to talking with your therapist, or as you get to talking with a medical professional, it's important
Hmm.
to bring these things up. What's important to
Right.
you? What's going to help you? Are you scared of medication? Maybe you don't want to be on medication your whole life. Talk
Right.
to your doctor about that. Let
Right.
them know. And if your doctor is not listening to you, either find a way to start to get that communication going better, or find a
Hmm.
new doctor. That is totally okay. And especially
Right.
with therapy, I think that that's one of the things that scares people the
Right.
most, is that they might go to therapy one time and they're like, that therapist was awful. I don't
Right.
want to do that
Right.
ever again, right?
Yeah.
And I tell folks, sometimes therapy is a little bit like dating in a weird way. You kind of got to test the waters with folks. You might got to
Right.
go on like a first date. You have to go to that
Right.
intake section first.
Right.
And you got to test it out. And some therapists are going to be a really bad date. And that is totally
Right.
fine to tell them, all right, this wasn't for me. I'm going to go find someone else. Or maybe
Right.
you learn something from one therapist for a little bit and you're like, all right, this
Right.
was good for this stage of my life, but not for the rest of my life.
Right. Right.
This was a good short-term relationship.
Right. And
So,
that's
yeah.
completely valid as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different ways for folks to go about handling their mental health, and we want folks to know that that's okay.
Right.
Everybody's different. Everybody's individual. We're not over here being these like cookie cutter gingerbread people
Mm.
that are
Right.
all within the same mold. That's not who we are. That's not who our
Right.
communities are. And so find something that works for you.
Mm.
Know what works generally the best,
Hmm.
and then start from there. And then also make a list of what works for you, what's
Hmm.
important for you. If you're looking for a therapist, maybe it's important for you to find a therapist within your ethnicity. Maybe it's important to find a
Right.
therapist within your religion. Maybe it's important
Right.
for you to find a therapist within your gender.
Mm.
Whatever that is, talk to your therapist about that. Ask those questions when you're calling
Mm.
them. And I have a whole laundry list that I give to therapists, and I say, if you can't figure it out, if you don't have these characteristics, I'm not even going to go to my intake session with you,
Right. Right.
And other people, it's very simple. Other people don't
Mm.
need a whole laundry list of things that they need. And at different points in my life, I've needed different things. So
Right.
sometimes I've had a laundry list, and sometimes I've just been like, just give me somebody to talk to,
Right.
So it depends on folks.
Right. Now, thank you so much, Alyssa. I think all of this has been incredible information. Please tell my audience again where they can get access to all of this, the MHA website and all the toolkits, the screening tests, all of this, and where can they find MHA on social media? Where can they find you on social media in case they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so for our main website is mhanational.org. .org. So MHANATIONAL.org. And on that website, you can find a whole variety of different things. You can find things like crisis resources, finding a warm line, which are it's like a hotline, but for if you're in less of if you're not in a crisis quite
Right.
yet,
Right.
and you just need to talk to somebody. It has information on finding help for somebody else. It has our toolkits.
Hmm.
It has how insurance works, what to expect. Find an MHA affiliate in your area. So you can go to mhanational.org for all of that information. And as throughout the year, typically from May through about September, October, November. So we have a toolkit coming out pretty much every single month for
Yeah,
some
that's
reason or
great.
another. Yeah. So we have May is Mental Health Month right now. June is Pride Month. July
Hmm.
is BB Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Month. Um, and then in August, we have back to school.
Hmm.
At another point, we might have a workplace mental health toolkit. We had one last year. We might have one for caregivers. It just depends on the year. So go in and check out our website. And then for screening, if you want to check in on your mental health and take a very brief mental health test, as a reminder, it is free.
Hmm.
You don't have to go through a whole bunch of sketchy ads and
Right.
paywalls and things like that at all. We are a nonprofit. I promise we're legit.
Right.
And so you can go to mhascreening.org,
Hmm.
mhascreening.org. And there you can either take a mental health test for yourself or somebody that you know as well if you are curious about maybe wanting to point somebody towards the right direction, but maybe don't know what kind of category they might fit into in terms of what the characteristics they're showing.
Right.
That's a good thing to do. And then you on there, you can also go through our learning pathways. At the top of our screening website, it has mental health information, and on there you can see all of the learning different pathways, as well as resources that has do-it-yourself tools.
Mm.
Information that is we have a lot of worksheets as well on there, and we also have an AI assistant that can
Hmm.
help you work through your thoughts as well, and
Oh,
and
wow.
and start to change some of your thoughts
Hmm.
on there. So go ahead and check that out. That's at mhascreening.org, and again, the website for our main content is mhanational.org.
Thank you so much, and everybody can see it on the screen. So and I will put those links in the show notes. And thank you so much again, Alyssa. All of this is such great information, especially for people who maybe struggling and they're not sure. But I think what MHA provides is so invaluable that at least, if nothing else, they can get information and maybe just get a sense of relief that, oh, maybe it's not depression, or maybe it's not anxiety, maybe it's just a phase of life I'm going through. But even then, MHA has the support system for that. So I'm so grateful to you, Alyssa, for coming on and giving all this great information to all my listeners and all the people who have viewed us on YouTube. So y'all take care of yourself, take care of your mental health as well, and may peace be on you all.